Welcome to the Connection Podcast. I am Lauren Dry, also known as the Connection Catalyst. Connection and this podcast for me is personal. As a driven professional, I found myself an expert in all things work and business, but it was at home that I really needed clarity and ease. After finally finding it one marriage breakdown and one marriage reset later, and finally discovering what really works to have connection in modern relationships, using science, simplicity and soul, our signature program Rise into Regulation was born that's giving so many others in modern driven relationships back clarity and ease for good. On the podcast today, we're going to dive deep together on all things relationships, business, identity and leadership. And clarity and ease is at the heart of it all, and we are so happy to be with you so that you can have what you need in connection, mind, body and soul too. Welcome to the Good Friend, Bad Friend episode. The episode that nobody wanted to film with me, and I can totally understand why. Talking about friendships is like walking through a minefield, and if you are one of my friends listening to this, thank you for celebrating me and being on this ride with me. And also, girl, I love you. Scroll on through. We're going to talk about some sticky stuff. We're going to talk about some lessons I've learned. We're going to talk about old perspectives that I had and where I'm sitting now. But this is an evolving journey. And if you are on a path where you are trying to figure out patterns that you've noticed in your friendships, if you're trying to be a good friend or figure out whether your friendships are serving you right now, this is the episode for you. Especially if you're noticing threads and familiar patterns and familiar dynamics in your marriage, in your relationships, in your friendships, maybe even your family, and you want to tease that out in a really, really safe place. Like, this is the episode for you. If you are a friend of mine and we've been on a ride and we've been on a journey and you're really at one of those stages with me where we have these conversations regularly, and I think that counts for most of my friends. I have so much joy and love in my heart for my beautiful circle right now. You know, grab a cuppa, sit with me on this, because this is going to be such a celebration of you, of us, and the journey that we've been on. And take everything with a grain of salt, because some of it might be stretchy. And if you think I'm talking about you personally, I'm not, unless I call you by name. So put your feet up. Join me on this wonderful little stretchy space where we can explore tough stuff together. And let's untangle the good friend, bad friend dynamic and figure out what it means to be a good friend, be true to yourself, have safe boundaries, but also not be enmeshed, and how we can look at our friendships to really untangle the patterns in our own intimate relationships that we absolutely can be free of and reset with a little bit of safety, a little bit of tenderness, and a lot of compassion, not only for ourselves, but for the people around us who are also growing too. I would like to start where I start many stretchy stories. Let's call it the year everything blew up. Let's start in 2019. I had two very young kids. My marriage was absolutely on the brink. This was just before COVID, and I already had some alternative views on everything from parenting to health to all sorts of things. But I kind of kept it under the radar. I liked thinking that I could compartmentalize myself and it wouldn't have any effect on the people around me. But the wheels were starting to fall off. My husband and I could not see eye to eye about anything. I don't think we trusted each other as far as we could throw each other, throw in a house move, and some friendship challenges that we were each experiencing, and you have a recipe for disaster. The majority of my friends didn't even have children at this stage. So the person I had grown into, I probably looked like I'd grown a second head. I hardly recognized myself. I had a picture of who I wanted to be as a mother, and I'm doing a recording on this, the motherhood transition, particularly if you're a businesswoman or an entrepreneur. Oh, this is going to be so valuable to you to gain a real sense of peace and security around who you are as a mother versus who you used to be, and how to bring those two together in harmony. But I was different to the person I thought I was going to be, and that was confusing. So my friends who I related to, because that's where I was before I had kids, I think they were actually concerned about my welfare. What is she doing? She's got these crazy ideas. Is she gonna start homeschooling? Is she gonna, like just any and all of the above. I also felt a deep sense of grief. I felt like I was losing relationships and friendships that were almost at many times more important to me than my partner. My boyfriend, then my partner, then my husband in different seasons had been incredibly important to me. And I just couldn't understand why we weren't on the same page. Then COVID hit, and I had moved somewhere where I was out of a boundary. So when borders were shut down, I wasn't allowed to come inside certain areas, even if it was for a short period of time. It really cemented that life had changed very much for me and not changed for others very much at all. There was a point in time where it all came to a head, where I had a mutual friend who had become part of a group of friends, and she and I didn't see eye to eye at all on many, many things. But I tried to fix it using the same tools I always had. Okay, if I keep trying, if I keep trying to rehash this conversation, if I keep being open to curiosity, I'll fix this and it'll all be okay and everything will go back to normal. And when that didn't work, in fact, I think having that same mentality only made things worse. My marriage was falling apart, had lost myself in my identity as a mother. My friendships were falling apart. I had difference of opinion around just anything, small world and big world, with my family. It seemed like the world had stopped turning and I'd lost myself completely. And it was probably one of the most isolating, confusing, and deeply humbling stages of my life. And the questions that I had for myself, the identity I'd built for myself, I am resilient. I am good at problem solving. I am a good friend. I'm intelligent. I know how to fix things. All of it just went out the window. How much of this was I responsible for? How much of this were other people responsible for? How much of this was the government's fault? How much of this was just growth, outgrowing each other? And I had to really go into a deep period of surrender and just trying to clean up my own house and being really proud of who I was again. And through that period, what I recognized is that there was so much of my identity that I had built on how other people saw me, that when I was in isolation and I really had an opportunity to learn who I was again, I I was lost. Was I really only someone who I really celebrated when that was celebrated by other people? And this is someone who had a really large community, large group of friends, and being forced physically, either through these lockouts or whatever it was, or socially because I was having a difference of opinion with a mutual friend, then what did that say about me? If I didn't have this reflection back onto me as to being the person that I thought I was, who am I really? Am I the bad friend or are they? And what I discovered were some really, really common threads. The common threads being, if you see me and you like me, you celebrate me, you spend time with me, then I can celebrate myself. I can get that feedback loop. And I found that really, really jarring because I had always thought of myself as someone deeply authentic and that it's okay if I have a difference of opinion with someone. It's okay if we disagree, whether it's about where to go to dinner or really big world topics, whether it's from lockdowns or health decisions. And so realizing that I felt this drift and this temptation to filter myself and water myself down in order to be more palatable, maybe even make big world life decisions according to whether I was going to be accepted or not. It was really jarring. Was I someone who was deeply authentic, or did I need to be someone who either adapted more so that I was accepted, or was I the problem? So these are huge questions. And I noticed a common thread as well coming through around the dangers and the fears of abandonment that I felt in my own marriage. And the same lenses of judgment or criticism or fear that were popping up in my marriage were the same thoughts and fears and judgments that I was placing on my friends. And they were the same negative thoughts, the same patterns. And what was feeling familiar was the same negative thoughts, the same patterns, the same beliefs that were popping up in my marriage. And the internal dialogue and the voice was identical. How could you do this to me? As in, be unkind or disagree or attack, which is what I felt at the time. How could you do this to me? How could you abandon me? What is it about me that is so different or so broken, even, that means that I can't have healthy relationships or we all can't get along and everyone can't be friends and ride off into the sunset together? And at that point in time, I really learnt what enmeshment actually is. Enmeshment isn't we have to be attached at the hip in order to be okay. And I have a previous episode on this. Enmeshment is very much if you are not happy, I am not okay. And during that season, everyone was unhappy. Okay. If we had a difference of opinion about big world stuff, everyone was unhappy because it felt threatening. This was new. There's never been a big world pandemic before. Everyone was fragile. Everyone was worried for their lives and the lives of people around them. And what I'd never realized is I hadn't built up enough safety in my own identity, in my own values, in my own non negotiables to be able to share them in a healthy way before all of this, so that when big world events and big life stages happened, it wasn't such a surprise to everyone around me as well as myself when differences of opinion happened and we couldn't see eye to eye. For example, I used to see myself as the chill girl. I could get along with anyone, could work anything out, everything's fine. And when I looked at my values, I realized actually that's not true. I'm just really, really good at twisting myself to be able to make this event happen or to be able to support you when you needed it, irrelevant of my needs, or even tolerate bad behavior if you were someone in my close circle of friends because I felt like that's what was necessary and it wasn't important to have some of the more difficult conversations. Or even when I did have difficult conversations, there was almost so much resentment built up that they became big deals, really, really big deals. But the final piece in the puzzle for me that was missing was recognizing that my identity and my sense of self worth was very much a reflection of how much that was mirrored back to me. So when I was having a difference of opinion with certain friends, I, instead of being able to create space, allow other people to have differences of perspective and differences of opinion, I felt this overwhelming urge to jump in and fix everything. Oh, I can make you see my perspective. We can all come back on the same page. It's all going to be fine. And as I've gotten older, I realized that really good friendships actually do mean that there's time and room and space for people to believe different things and sometimes maybe even drift apart. If you have anxious attachment style, please go back and look at some of my previous episodes on this. What you'll hear when I'm saying allow people to drift is allow abandonment to happen. Maybe not consciously, but your body might be rejecting that and saying, no, 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 you have to work things out. You have to put the hard yards in. That's definitely what I did. But often when people are going through seasons of fear and stress and overwhelm and worry, the greatest gift that you can give them is time, care, and respect for their own life path to be able to work it out. The wound of enmeshment, though, will not let that happen. Now, am I saying that anytime you have a rupture with a friend or a disagreement, you should not try and work it out? Absolutely not. But what I will say is if you have anxious attachment style and there are moments in time where you have noticed ruptures or confusion and it feels almost like the end of the world. Oh my gosh, we have to work this out. We have to work this out right now or the world will end. That is a really strong reflection of an enmeshment pattern. And although it might provide a temporary fix for you, I want to give you a moment to pause and just take a second, take a breath in, take a breath out again, and consider, has this enmeshment pattern prevented you from having even more safety in your friendships, in your relationships, in your marriage than is currently possible right now? Has this enmeshment pattern prevented you from having true, authentic, safe connection in any friendship, in any marriage, in any relationship at all, because the focus has been how do I keep this person around versus how do I create true safety where there is room to flex and room to have more complex conversations because you each know each other deeply at the root, at your heart, and can care for each other there at that stage as well. Now, when I started doing hidden pattern work, I recognized that these enmeshment wounds, these anxious patterns, these abandonment wounds, they do all come from a belief or a decision or a toxic wound that was created deep early on in childhood or in your early life. And again, often no criticism to your primary caregivers. A lot of the people that I do work with say, my parents are great, no criticism to them. But often these toxic patterns come about whether you do have a healthy dynamic at home or not. The patterns just get reinforced according to the kind of partners that you choose, the kind of friendships that you end up in, and protective behaviors and reflexes get built whether we wish they were or not. And something I used to think of often when I was on my healing journey was why would I do this to myself? Why would I put myself in situations in relationships, in rooms where the same toxic cycles would repeat, the same enmeshment, the same abandonment wounds, the same toxicity, the same anxiety loops. Why unconsciously would I do this to myself? It sounds sadomasochistic. And I have mentioned this before, but if you haven't heard this in a previous podcast episode, the reason why we do this and we put ourselves in these same relationships again and again, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a work dynamic, whether it's a partner, is because there is an unconscious desire to repair the loop. So these hidden patterns, these beliefs, these toxic cycles, they begin at a stage in our life where we didn't have the opportunity to leave. We didn't have the opportunity to have repair. And so we built a pattern that worked and that protected us temporarily, that gave us the semblance of attention instead of deep, authentic connection. And so, what we do as we get older is we repeat that dynamic again and again. We choose the same kinds of people, whether it's friendships or partners or just familiar conversation dynamics, because we really want to repair that loop. We want to feel a sense of deep, authentic connection. And what my mind had been doing for so many years in the past is just reaching for this performance kind of level friendship where I was gaining a sense of validation and a sense of attention and a sense of celebration for how well I showed up. But when it came down to the crunch and the pressure was on, if it's a world pandemic or a big house move or becoming a mother, whatever it was, it all came to a head when all of these things happened at once. And my identity was really put under the spotlight of being challenged and asked, okay, who am I really outside of the performance? And I'll be honest, at that point in time, I didn't know. I didn't know how much of me was performance and how much of me was truth. All I knew was that I clearly had built relationships on sand instead of on rock. And so, whether it was a big world event or a micro world challenge of becoming a mother myself, the relationships that I thought had been built on a strong foundation washed away, whether it was temporarily or only slightly. But in my own mind and my own experience, I wasn't able to find safety in them. And that was terrifying. And so, for better or worse, what this meant is that I had a reset button. I had a moment in time to really decide who am I and how do I show up? And are the relationships that I'm going to rebuild from here on in going to be built on safety and security or performance again, which means that, the next time there's a big world event, whether it's a pandemic or a war or a choice between right or left, are all my relationships going to be put to the test of a perspective and an opinion as opposed to deep, secure care and curiosity for the real true values that I trust in these people or that these people trust in me? Am I going to be able to rest in the security of if I perform well, my relationships will do well? Or can my relationships sustain differences of opinion, which it turns out is incredibly important to me. And so I got to work figuring out who I genuinely am. Who am I in relationships, even when the ground is rocky and when things are uncertain and we do disagree? Who am I in relationships when my lifestyle values are different? Who am I when I have values clashes with people right at a core level? And can I count on myself to be consistent no matter what others are doing or what their choices are? And I'll be honest, when I originally asked that question, the answer was no. I don't think I could count on myself. And I had such fear of losing these relationships. I didn't know who I was in the dynamic anymore. So it wasn't until I went through the relationship death stage, which I talk about a lot on the podcast, that's really important in any relationship, but especially in marriage, that I was able to rebuild from the ground up who I am and show up with a lot of authenticity and honesty in any of these friendships, any of these relationships, so that I could really be honest about who I was and not a version that just made everyone else feel comfortable, so that when big things happened, oh my gosh, who's this person now that Lauren is evolving into, and taking anyone off guard. And that deep sense of security that I found unexpectedly created these new dynamics where if you had told me the friendships I would have reconnected with in the years following 2019 would have happened back then, I would have told you you're mad. You're absolutely bonkers. That's not going to happen. We're too different. Too much water has gone under the bridge. And I just think that we're completely different people to who we thought that we were. But I think when you allow other people the grace and time to grow and allow others around you to have space to misunderstand you and to have room to choose whether to be curious about who you are as time goes on or not, the majority of people genuinely will surprise you. I have had conversations where old friends have come up and said to me the most mind-blowingly wonderful revelations. "Lauren, I've learned so much since last we spoke. Everything that you thought was right, and I really miss you. I've been thinking about you so much, and I wish we could reconnect." And those are brave conversations, those are brave admissions, and also some unnecessary statements. I don't need anyone else to tell me that I'm right, but the curiosity that they had to explore my perspectives, even in a time where we weren't speaking, I celebrate them so much. But that I think was only possible because I genuinely respected that it's okay for them to have a difference of opinion. And I treated them with kindness, but also secure boundaries throughout that time. So I learnt a lot, not only about myself, but also the depth and breadth that others are capable of growth if you give a little time, give a little faith, and also not interlink your identity and who you are with the outcome and the results of how people around you behave. Genuinely, I think the majority of people around you have the capacity to surprise you in the most wonderful ways. I have been taken off guard so beautifully in the years following 2019 in ways that not only I never expected, but that never would have been possible if I hadn't given myself grace, given the people around me grace, and discovered who I was at the root so that I never took others off guard again. And I also know how to have a difference of opinion now in future that keeps me deeply safe, but also allows me to deeply trust the people around me so that my ground isn't shaken if we have differences of opinion again in future at all. I know where we all stand. And I think the depth and maturity of relationships that have gone through a stage like that, I wouldn't give them up for anything. I wouldn't give them up for surface level friendships ever. And nothing against surface level friendships. I think that I have plenty that I really enjoy and I think are important at this stage of life. I like to say at the moment, I'm a terrible friend. If you want me to bounce back and forward with your text messages 20 times a day, I can refer you to someone else. In terms of quality time, it's probably my business and my family. And luckily, because I know that, I have the capacity and the ability to show up with a lot of depth and connection in the deep friendships that I have now, and also to really care for the friendships that maybe are newer friendships or that we only meet every once in a while, but I still really cherish them. I bring my full self to the table then and there. So if you are going through a season of, am I a good friend? Are they a good friend? Am I stuck in this dynamic where I'm really noticing the same patterns in my friendships as my marriage, as my relationships, and sometimes even in my parenting, I want to break that pattern. I really want to encourage you to allow, even if it's just an hour, even if it's just a week, even if it's just a moment in time where you allow all of your identities just to drop and how you see yourself in all of these relationships just to drop and allow some room and some space to recreate your relationship with yourself. I think the question of who's a good friend and who's a bad friend really falls away, and you get to determine who am I in any of these relationships, and get that security back so that you can really enjoy connections that are safe and secure and have discernment around what relationships are safe and secure, and allow people to step into their best selves and surprise you in the best of ways. I consider myself so unspeakably blessed in all of my relationships right now. I know even if I rested my attention on some relationships where we're not even seeing eye to eye right now, I am still so trusting of those people's paths and where they are right now, and I know it'll work out, and that I don't need to place any pressure on those people. I need to show up as my best self for me, not even for them, just for me, and to trust that there's a purpose in all of this. And if there's anything I could leave you with from this episode in order to have that grace is, 1, discover your attachment style. I have some episodes that I can link in the show notes here that can support you with that. There's plenty of free quizzes as well. It can be tricky though. So if you find that you're not resonating with one particular attachment style, come and hang out in the DMs on Instagram. I would love to help you unpack that. 2, uncover the common words and phrases that you notice pop up in the similar dynamics, journal on them, even the good ones. I'm such a good friend, and really unpack how that's providing a semblance of safety as opposed to true safety. And 3, get started on the inner work, okay? Whether that's you go and find a counselor or a therapist that you trust, whether that's you find a coach, whether you get started on the RISE process, which we are so passionate about here in terms of allowing you to reset your hidden patterns. Find what works for you to be able to get back to you irrelevant of what's going on around you, and experience that sense of freedom that comes with having a deep and secure relationship with yourself. If this brought up anything for you, I'd love to take it a little bit deeper. Come and hang out in the DMs over on Instagram at Lauren_dry. If you feel like this is something important that maybe a friend of yours needs to hear, please feel free to share this episode with them. And make sure to follow along and subscribe to hang out on the connection journey. I'm so blessed to share this space with you and to have these deep conversations. And I cannot wait to be with you again next time. Big love.